Hi guys, so today I want to talk a bit about VGC, and to be more specific, I want to talk about hacking in VGC. I know I'm kind of late to the party, but around the World Championship it was really much discussed because a bunch of players got disqualified for using hacked Pokemons, and I want to share my personal thoughts about this topic. Some things up front. Personally, I have never played VGC so far. I have just watched a couple of videos on YouTube, and yes, I have watched a bunch of videos from Verlisify, and I think that he is mostly correct about the topic, to be honest. Though I know that most players don't agree with him, and he's like kind of the laughingstock of the community. Everybody is, oh, Verlisify is doing drama again, and yeah, he kind of is. But I think in general the community is just somehow they just cannot accept the reality that Jennings is not okay. And I want to argue for that point because I personally think also that Felicify is arguing for that point from a kind of weird angle. And I think the best way to approach this topic is making a good comparison. And I think thereby I can highlight what is specifically wrong in my opinion with Jennings and explain more why we should get rid of it. I'm assuming everybody knows what Jennings is, but for everybody who doesn't know, Jennings is just the process of using like secondary software to illegally hack basically a Pokemon into the game. The important thing is that the Pokemon you create is still a Pokemon you could theoretically obtain in the game, so you don't like make something insane like you give your Pokemon stats it couldn't have or anything like that. You just go in the program and say, okay, I want to have this program, then you add it. I've never done this process, but as far as my understanding goes, that is how it works. And this process has become quite common for competitive players to do this, mostly just to, on the one hand, save time, because creating a Pokemon team is really, really time intensive. And also certain Pokemon, it is just impossible basically to obtain them. For instance, if they have like an event-specific move, and if you didn't play back then, it is really hard to get that Pokemon. Basically, in that case, you either need to trade for that Pokemon from a friend, or you use software to gain it by other means. Most proponents of Jennings argue that it is like fine, because it doesn't inherently give you an unfair advantage. Because it is not like you create something which would be completely impossible to get in the game. You're still using stuff which are still in the boundaries of the rules. And especially like if everybody does it, then there is no real disadvantage. It is mostly just a time save. In the actual gameplay, when you're actually playing against your opponent, it doesn't really benefit you that you chose to basically cheat. So most players wouldn't argue and saying it like cheating, they would use different terms. To go back to the beginning, Velicify, yes, I'm talking about him, is basically just making the simple case and saying, it is not legal, quote unquote, to manipulate the game. You're literally cheating, hacking at the game, and therefore everybody who does this should be called a cheater and should be disqualified or even banned for life if this stuff occurred multiple times. I have a different position on this actually. I think in order to explain my view, I want to tell you about a comparison. So my personal background is that I really like to play trading card games. And I think a good comparison is not something like hard cheating, so stuff like stacking your opponent's deck, marking your opponent's cards, and then calling a judge so your opponent gets disqualified, not that type of stuff, but using faked cards. What are fake cards? I mean, it's quite easy, just somebody like goes ahead and fakes a card which actually exists. There can be different reasons why people want to do this. Most of the time it is just because so they don't have to like actually pay the money to get these cards. But there are like also other instances. For instance, when I play at my local shop, there is a player who basically always has no actual real cards, and it is often called proxies. So proxies are quote-unquote fake cards, but they are trying to be authentic. It's just like a placeholder, and somebody like writes on a piece of paper, this is card X, Y, or Z. People do this for testing. Like if you want to test out a deck, you don't want to instantly buy all the cards and pay like $200 for a deck where you aren't even sure if you will actually enjoy it. So you will just like write down, okay, this is this card, this is this card, this is this card. Your opponent should basically know these cards because these are like really popular cards in the metagame usually. Or like you write what this card does exactly on the text, and then you like just playtest against other players and see if you like it. This is like the quote-unquote legal thing, which most people like accept then the fake cards. But I've also seen people like who don't just take like a piece of paper, they actually like print out the card. And most common is this kind of stuff in the retro community. So players who want to play with really, really old decks. And those cards have gotten really, really expensive. And as it is mostly just play for fun, people go, okay, I don't want to like pay like $500 for this Pokemon deck or Yu-Gi-Oh deck or whatever. I will just like print out these cards, make them look kind of decent, and then I will test it out. If I actually enjoy it, then I will maybe get the real cards, and if not, I will just like play on with it. And this kind of stuff is most of the time also like accepted. I've like even seen like people at like League or like really small events playing with these quote-unquote fake cards. On the other hand, though, there's also like this scummy stuff, so this stuff which happens mostly at like schoolyards, where you have like companies who produce these fake cards en masse and actually sell them, and the little children think they are real cards, and then yeah, they are usually quite sad when they come to the store and they are told, hey, I'm sorry, but this VMAX which you have there, that is not an actual real card. Okay, now this was just me explaining what are fake cards. Now I want to explain why I think they are a good comparison to Genning and Pokemon. So the first thing, if you play in an actual tournament with fake cards, you do not inherently get an advantage over your opponent. Let's say like all of your Pokemon in your deck aren't real cards, they are fake cards, but they are still Pokemon which are legal in the current format. It is like you don't gain something which would be impossible to do with actual real cards. Your actual card is like not on a technicality, not real. Another good comparison point is that these cards are cheaper, or it's like easier to get them compared to obtaining them on the actual legal way, and both things aren't okay in like a tournament setting. There we can also see what I want to argue. I'm not arguing Villicify's point that genning is like illegal at any case. I'm really specifically saying genning or using fake cards is not okay when you're playing in official licensed tournaments, or obviously if you're like trading or like selling with other people. These are the instances where I think this kind of stuff and behavior is not okay. So I said, I do not have a problem when people play VGC on Showdown. I do not have a problem when like two friends are playing against each other just quickly and they like shortly like just cheat their Pokemon so they can do weird stuff. I also don't have a problem like with a Nuzlocke. On a similar level, I do not have a problem when somebody comes like to the shop and hasn't finished building his deck, and so therefore is like proxying stuff. I don't have a problem playing with other people retro formats and their own decks aren't like actually consisting of real cards, and it's just like a game for fun. I do not have a problem with these instances. I specifically disagree though that it should be legalized to use gen Pokemon or fake cards in officially licensed tournaments. And it is to me personally insane that people are seriously arguing for that type of stuff. Couple of more instances. People would then say, okay, yeah, look, it is with cards, it is easier to obtain these. There are like insane specific Pokemon which are basically impossible, like obtaining legendaries with like 0 EVs and IVs in like speed because you're playing a Trick Room team or something like that. I do not think that accessibility really gives you an argument to cheat. For instance, with Pokemon, we had a card like Tropical Beach, which was a promo which was only given away at the World Championships. And obtaining this card was really, really hard, especially like at the first World Championship where it was played. Also at other card games like Yu-Gi-Oh! We had. examples of prize cards, which were like insane stuff like Minerva, so on. The thing is, just because these cards are hard to get, players didn't necessarily started through cheating en masse and like print out these cards and using fake cards, because well, it is impossible to obtain these cards, but they are like some of the best cards in the format. So therefore, well, the company messed up and now I'm allowed to cheat. This did not happen. Well, the players who had these cards, they used them, and the other players just needed to adapt to the fact that there are like really powerful cards, which are kind of stupid, and deal with it. To be fair, the companies have recognized that these cards are just really, really toxic, and basically every tournament promo from the last couple of years, they've focused on making those cards more or less useless, because it is just really poor for the gameplay. But still, the point stands, just because something is absurdly hard to obtain, it does not give you the permission to say, okay, yeah, this is hard to obtain, but I want to be a competitive player, and therefore I will just now start like cheating. This is not okay. Even though for some people they seem to think that this is just okay. Other points. Another point I've heard often is that the big difference is that it is way easier to recognize whether a card, a physical card, is faked or not. Most of the time it is pretty easy if you've played the game a bit, but recognizing that a Pokemon is gemmed or faked is really, really hard. It's not intuitive. You cannot like just look at it and see this is fake. You basically need to use external software, then really go into the code and see if everything matches up, and if like something is weird, then you can recognize that Pokemon is actually gemmed. And basically, to recognize if something is real or not in Pokemon, you need to ask a hacker, which is kind of counterintuitive. I think that is a fair criticism, that is like really hard, but to a certain extent, it just is what it is. For instance, I'm just not convinced that because it is hard to recognize if a Pokemon is real or not, that therefore it should be legal to always also use like faked Pokemons. If you like look at children, for instance, who are like playing Pokemon on the schoolyards and they are using a lot of fake Pokemon cards, when those come to actual tournaments and so on, we are telling them, hey, I'm sorry, but this card is not real, and you will need to replace it. Obviously, given the context, like you won't like instantly maybe disqualify those little children if it's like, okay, yeah, this child has no chance at like winning the tournament anyways. They're like you decide which penalty you want to give that child and so on. But yeah, just because it is hard to recognize, that doesn't justify saying, yeah, okay, so because it is impossible or really hard to do, it's fine if everything is faked. As I said, like on so many levels, like just because, like if we would really think that this stuff is just like so close to the actual real thing, so it shouldn't matter, do you think it is ethically completely fine if somebody like gens a Pokemon and then just trades it away, telling their friend this is an actual legit Pokemon? Do you think that is fine? I personally do not think so, and I think on a similar level it is not fine to like make a fake Pokemon card or Yu-Gi-Oh card and then trying to sell it off on the secondary market. I think if we can recognize that, we should also recognize, yeah, okay, using these cards in official tournaments, as I said, in official tournaments cannot be okay. This is a different case if you just make this stuff for your own sake and use it on like a non-competitive environment just for fun. But especially doing this kind of stuff at tournaments is just not okay, in my opinion. Also, another thing, like just because people think, yeah, okay, most of the community agrees that genning is fine, therefore it should be legal, I don't think that is a good argument. Especially like if we look back in the history of different trading card games, we can see that cheating was normalized in many card games. I think it's quite famous, for instance, in stuff like Magic the Gathering, where it was like, okay, every quote-unquote professional player is cheating. The player who's better at cheating tends to win more. Also, games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a bunch of famous cheaters, and certain things just were kind of normalized. I think it is a good thing that people started calling out these types of behaviors, that this it just has to be done so that this mentality like just changes and people stop normalizing cheating. It is insane to me. And I think it is something which has to be called out more often so that this type of behavior ceases to exist. So another point, I don't think that I'm not saying that this is like necessary for every team that it took for ages to make that team. I'm not opposed if like the Pokemon company starts making it way more easier to obtain Pokemon. I would be a fan of it. But just because they haven't done that, it does not allow you to cheat your Pokemon for official tournaments. To summarize my points, I do think that genning is cheating, not in a hard way like stacking, which gives you an absurd advantage, but just blatantly ignoring the given rules of the tournament. So therefore, yes, Buildify is mostly correct. I do understand the criticism that I'm not really giving a solution for making team building more easy or inclusive in this video. Basically, I'm just saying that genning is not a feasible solution for this problem. But yeah, that's just my opinion. My overall goal with this video is to reach the VGC community and change the general mindset towards accepting that genning is wrong and that the community should do something against it or at least look negatively upon it. With that said, goodbye and have a nice day.